Well, it's later in the day. In fact, it's the nighttime now, and I'm driving. I'm winding my way back home, slowly but surely. And I had a few more thoughts about Charlie Kirk that I wanted to share. I've listened to a few broadcasts of people talking about the event of the terrible, horrific event of Charlie Kirk's assassination in broad daylight by someone that they say is they've profiled because they found the bullet with pro-trans and anti-fascist messages on them, and so they think it's some trans guy or some trans supporter or something. But I listened to a few different podcasts from various dissident right people, and I was struck by a couple of things. One of the things that struck me was that everybody was saying, "This is it. This is the occasion. We're going to see a seismic shift now. Now that this has happened, now that they've gunned down Charlie Kirk on a college campus in Utah, in Orem, Utah, of all places. Now that this kind of none that this has happened, it's things are going to accelerate rapidly, and the days of agreeing to disagree are going to be over." And basically, they're saying, we're tumbling towards civil war, and this event accelerated. The assassination of Charlie Kirk accelerated our inevitable new civil war paradigm. Just about everybody said something along those lines. There were little variations here or there, but it was something like that. Like this just and the comparisons were made to 9/11. Of course, him being shot on September 10th, the day before 9/11, and 9/11 happening 24 years ago. For those of us who can remember it, I'm among those of us who could remember it. Most of the people I was listening to were, in middle school at the time of 9/11. I was 30 years old, so they were a little younger, but they still could remember the occasion, and they were saying that was an event that catapulted us in a different sort of direction as a society, and the same way this assassination of Charlie Kirk is going to have a similar effect. Not that it's going to be the same effect, but it will be similarly impactful. But almost the opposite. Whereas 9/11 at the time, because it wasn't really questioned, people didn't look at it and see all the contradictions that so many people see today. People just looked at it as we've been attacked by someone outside of some outside force, and we've got to band together and rally as a nation. And people believe that. If you can believe it, if you're a young person and this seems just completely alien to you, because the way things are now, we're never going to band together as a nation on hardly anything, except maybe hating Philly. Philly Karen, who I talked about a couple days ago. But now things are so divided, and they're going to be more. The commentary was that things were going to become more divisive, and like this was the start of really rough times, and more violent times. So that was one thing that they were all saying, and the other thing that everybody was saying, everybody that I heard, and these were all dissident right people. These were not neocon people. These were not Zionists. And so I was expecting there to be some, like a voice or two out there saying something like, oh, well, it's a shame what happened to Charlie Kirk, but he was a Zionist, so, good riddance to bad rubbish. I mean, maybe not something quite so harsh as that, but something along the lines of, he wasn't really one of us. But nobody was talking that way, and that was a little surprising, because I know that people, on the dissident right were pretty harsh in their feelings towards Charlie Kirk. Maybe for good reason. Maybe his whole backing of his largely, as I understand it, largely unquestioning or largely relentless backing of everything Israel was doing, until up to a point. There seems to have been some question whether in the last few weeks or so he was maybe not as sure on his perspective of, and there was buzzing about how he was afraid that if he turned against Israel, some harm might come to him. But that's just sort of a rumor, like that somebody reported hearing him say, and was reported to somebody else. We don't know what the veracity is, but there are actual recordings of him saying, taking Israel slightly to task for this, that, or the other thing, or for saying, that certain anti-white organizations had a heavy Jewish representation, which was sort of, that's getting into more edgy sort of territory. So, but that aside, even though, generally speaking, he was very pro-Israel and a Zionist and supportive of what Israel was doing in Gaza, I did not hear people putting him down for that. I didn't hear people, saying, well, the chickens have come home to roost. People were sympathetic. People were shaken, the same way that I was shaken. As I reported earlier today in the video that I recorded, it seemed that was really people saw these videos of him, these heartbreaking now videos of him hugging his kids and holding his baby, and to think that he was murdered in front of them, in front of his wife and his kids, and that his children are going to grow up without a father, and his wife is now a widow. It's so awful, and the awfulness really struck me, and I was surprised that it seemed to strike a lot of other people who I would have thought maybe would be a little more tough-minded or a little more callous, considering what maybe they thought of as unpardonable sins. Fuentes, took it really hard, and made a post where he said, something like, this feels like a nightmare, and he said, I'm not going to do a show today out of respect to Charlie Kirk. And this is from Charlie Kirk's number one nemesis, Nick Fuentes, and there was someone asked me, someone joked about Sam Hyde. If Sam Hyde did it, the joke about Sam Hyde doing all every bad thing, and he keeps getting away with it. But after reading that comment and responding to it humorously with that meme, I actually saw the podcast that Sam Hyde was doing with the other two MDE guys, with Nick and Charles, and actually they're just talking about they're shooting the breeze and talking about various things, and they're told in the midst of all this, they get told that Charlie Kirk has been shot and killed at this campus event, and they are completely taken aback and shocked, and there's no ironic sort of reaction, there's no callous guess the chickens came home to roost kind of reaction to it. I think deep down, a lot of people, even the people who disliked or who made Charlie Kirk their enemy because he represented the conservative establishment and Zionism, and they wanted to chip away at him, or just be his nemesis in some way, and whether it was Nick Fuentes or others with similar perspectives. I think it seems like a lot of people realize the same thing that I realized, which is that this was a really wonderful man, who seemed to be without malice, who seemed to take being raked over the coals a lot, being a punching bag. He seemed to take it with grace, and who honestly who had a good heart, who did these campus events again, not because he wanted to dunk on these stupid brainwashed kids, which is what a lot of the right-leaning speakers who go to college campuses really like. I remember Ben Shapiro a few years ago, and I know Ben Shapiro's very much persona non grata in the dissident right, but a few years ago he was going to campuses and he would dunk on these stupid, snotty little kids who were just repeating what their women's studies professors had told them, and it was like, it was fun, it was entertaining, but it was kind of a Schadenfreude sort of thing. It was not there was something tainted to the enjoyment of it, because you knew that these 19 and 20-year-olds, however annoying they were, you knew they were not the intellectual equal of Ben Shapiro or of whoever, the other right-leaning people who'd go to these campuses and take these stupid kids to task and humiliate them and make them look like idiots. But Charlie Kirk didn't seem like, even though he was doing something similar and visiting college campuses and being being a dissident voice, being a voice of conservatism, being a Trump supporter among all of these communists and radical feminists and trans activists and whatnot. He seemed to do it without malice. With him, it was, it was a belief. It was trying to reach people. For one thing, it was trying to get his message out, and for another thing, it was trying to have a meeting of the minds. Really just believing in freedom of speech and believing that we should be able to have vigorous debate and still be able to get along as a society, which seems kind of naive, but it seems like it was something that he actually believed. I say it seems naive because we all know what happens on in these leftist indoctrination centers, like a lot of college campuses. We know that there's no even playing field. We know that there's no intellectual honesty, but he seemed to be somebody who was approaching this situation not with the idea of trying to make people look stupid or humiliate them or even send them up. You all know I'm a big fan of Sam Hyde, and his antics. Part of what's enjoyable about his antics is seeing him just get in front of an audience and totally make them hate him and just troll them relentlessly and without without feeling any kind of self-consciousness about it, the way most of us do. I think that's the appeal of Sam Hyde, and it's entertaining and it's provocative and everything. But Charlie Kirk was somebody who just wanted to reach people and just wanted to talk to people. And here's what I'm wondering. I'm going to put something out there that maybe it's naive, maybe it's stupidly optimistic, but I just wonder if, based on what I heard, there were a lot of people whose hearts were truly broken to hear about Charlie Kirk's murder. And these were dissident right people, who you think would be critical or you think would be callous or, say, oh well, and move on. No great loss, but that's not how they reacted at all. Now I know that there are a lot of awful people on social media, or maybe it's just that social media brings out people's awfulness. I don't know, but there are a lot of people, getting on TikTok or whatever or wherever and celebrating and laughing and jeering at this man, getting murdered and his kids having their father taken away from them. And of course that's, it's sickening to see these montages of people reacting that way. But I just suspect that a lot of hearts have been really moved, broken, and then also moved to hear about this violence done unto a good man, this violence that was done in broad daylight against a thoroughly decent, loving father and husband, and a deeply devout Christian. I think last time I said I thought he was Catholic. I think he was not Catholic, but he was Christian, and he was very devout in his faith. And maybe the change that we're going to see, maybe there is going to be a change, but maybe the change is going to be that we're going to see people's hearts softened, and we're going to see formerly hateful, hardened people, like the sort that you see on social media, making jokes about his death, that maybe the majority, or maybe what we'll see, it might not all happen at once, but I think there's something just so self-evidently wrong with what happened to Charlie Kirk. This wouldn't strike people if he was some angry loudmouth or some obnoxious gadfly, but that's not what he was like. And people know, you have a sense of who people are, no matter what your ideology might lead you to think. People who have a particular ideology might be led to think that everybody who's not of your ideology, or everybody who supported the candidate that you hated, is despicable and worthy of torture and death. That's what their ideology brings out in them. But something in them knows that that's not right. And just the same way that although this is flirting with being blasphemous, the same way that when Jesus Christ was crucified, and there was so much cruelty and torment, as is recorded in the Gospels, surrounding what happened to him, and people saw that he was blameless, and that this was the worst kind of injustice for a man who was not just innocent, but innocence itself. Not just good, but goodness itself. For someone like him to be victimized the way that he was. I'm not saying Charlie Kirk is Jesus Christ, God forbid. I know he would never want me or anybody else to say that. But the same way that hearts and minds were moved by Christ's crucifixion, and formerly hardened people saw that their eyes were opened, the scales fell from their eyes, and they saw reality for what it is, and they realized the error of their prior way of thinking, their prior way of looking at things. It's not that I'm not saying all liberals have to cease being liberal or anything like that, but I'm just wondering if I'm putting it out there, if the seismic shift that's going to happen, if there's going to be a seismic shift in attitudes, maybe it's not the worst case scenario that y'all are talking about. Maybe it's not, okay, now Now comes civil war. Now comes, even more violence. Maybe, who knows? Who knows? If you believe in God, if you're a person of faith, you believe that miracles can happen and that God can use terrible things to cause wonderful things to happen. All of Mexico, if you're a believing Catholic, you talk about the image that appeared to Juan Diego of the Blessed Virgin Mary, Our Lady, what's known as Our Lady of Guadalupe. If you believe that, well, whether you believe it or not, the fact is, that Mexico went from this, or the population of Mexico, much of which at the time was pagan natives, who believed in animism and various pagan gods and whatnot, that their hearts were so moved by this image of the Virgin, which you can still see today. So I hear, hanging in a church in Mexico City, that this image of the Virgin that appeared on the tilma, the robe worn by this Indian Juan Diego, caused this change that brought millions and millions of people into the church. Something like that can happen if hearts can change over an event like that, miraculous event like that. I don't think it's out of line to ask if the blood that was shed from an innocent, good, devout man like Charlie Kirk, if some good could come of it, if it might again cause the scales to fall from people's eyes and cause them to stop being brainwashed by their vicious ideologies and start seeing the people they think of as their enemies as their fellow man, their fellow brothers and sisters in Christ. I don't know. You may say I'm a dreamer, but it's just a possibility that we should be open to, I think. What do y'all think?